5 best decisions that I've made in the Army. I've been in the Army now for almost 16 years. It's hard to believe that it's been that long. I can blink my eye and it's gone by so quickly, from when I went to basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, to when I was a company commander at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, until now working at the Pentagon. But in this video, I'm going to share with you the 5 best decisions that I've made in the Army. If you're thinking about joining the Army or you're curious about the Army, wherever you are, I think this would be a good video for you to watch so you can understand what it's like to be in the Army for a prolonged period of time. The first decision that I'm going to discuss is my decision to apply for the General James Wright MBA program at the College of William and Mary. I was accepted. I attended the College of William and Mary for my Master's of Business Administration from 2017 to 2018. It was fully funded by the Army. It was absolutely one of the best decisions I've ever made in the Army and in my life. I didn't quite appreciate how excellent of an opportunity it was to go to a school of that tier, a public Ivy League school like William and Mary, and it met all the expectations. I'm not sure what I was expecting going into it. I was younger. It was back in 2017. I was more immature. I wasn't as mature back then. I didn't know what to expect. I figured that it was the best thing I could do for my career at the time, but it was one of the best experiences I've had in my life, and I'll tell you why. First, the MBA program at the College of William and Mary at the Mason School taught me how to think about life and about business in a completely different way. It taught me a lot of skills that I still use today. The main skill, technical skill, specific skill that I was taught at the College of William and Mary was how to use Microsoft Excel. I never understood the power of Microsoft Excel. I never understood how I could use it for my personal and my professional life. I remember getting there in 2017 and I didn't even know how to do a sum function, and the professor had to teach me how to do it right then and there. It was kind of embarrassing, but that was my foundation. And by the end of the year, I'm not an expert in Excel, but I was proficient enough to where I have used it in my job in such a way where people have asked me, where did you learn that? How do you do that? Can you help me with my Excel work and things of that nature? So that's just one thing, just using Microsoft Excel. I've been able to use it for my finances, to be able to track my finances, and it's made the world of difference. It's added a lot of value to my life. In one specific example, I'll always remember, we were working with the Army test community to try to get an important document through their staffing process. And this specific test agency wanted something like 20 days, 20 working days to be able to staff the document. During that meeting that we had, I showed them in Excel, if you take 20 days, we're going to be all the way out in staffing and getting this document approved by 3 or 4 months. And I was able to show them in Excel in real time using the workday formula function, and everyone was just silent. And it's not that I'm a genius or anything like that, but it's because I learned all that stuff at the College of William and Mary. And I was able to convince everybody on that call that we can't take 20 days. Also, I ended up switching to the acquisition corps about a year, almost 2 years after I graduated from College of William and Mary. And there were 2 classes that I took as an introduction to the Mason School in 2017. There were 2 classes about how Congress works and how the budget works. Not a lot of people, not a lot of Americans or anyone who follows the American government understands how the budget is constructed and how Congress works. I had no idea until I took that class, and that's helped me in my job in the Army Acquisition Corps, because a lot of people complain about Congress, a lot of people complain about the budget, but if you don't know how the budget is built and if you don't know how Congress functions, it's probably a good idea to understand those 2 things. When I went to the Mason School at the College of William and Mary, I was at a point in my life where I was experiencing a lot of financial difficulty, and simply learning about corporate finance and learning how to be more frugal with my money. They didn't have any personal finance classes in the curriculum at the College of William and Mary, but I was learning all of this corporate finance and all these different case studies on companies that failed, companies that did well. And I was able to apply a lot of that to my personal life. And I was having a lot of trouble financially. I was unaware of how much trouble I was in financially. And I don't know if I would be in the position that I'm in today if I hadn't gone to the Mason School. A great decision that I made in the Army was transitioning to the Acquisition Corps. In the United States Army, the way that the Acquisition Corps and the rest of the functional areas work is that you have to be in the Army for a certain amount of time. If you're on the officer side like me, you have to be in the Army for a certain amount of time. It's around 8 years before you have the privilege to be able to apply to transition. We call it the VTIP, to do a voluntary application to transition to one of the other functional areas. I had worked for a contracting general in the past when I was an aide de camp, so I figured that if I was going to switch to a functional area from my branch, my base branch, which was logistics, that I was going to do acquisition. And I talked to my dad about it too, and my dad was in the Army for a long time as well. He advised me to go acquisition, so I listened to him, and I'm glad that I did. The reason that I switched to the Acquisition Corps and why I believe that it was such a great decision was that my career had been going excellent up to the point that I got to Fort Lee. Back then it was called Fort Lee, now it's called Fort Gregg Adams. But up until I got to Fort Gregg Adams, after I graduated from the College of William and Mary, everything had gone according to plan. But when I got to Fort Gregg Adams, I ran into some poor leadership. I was transferred to 5 different jobs around the base. They weren't sure what to do with me because I was on a utilization tour from the College of William and Mary, and I had to do 2 years at Fort Gregg Adams as part of my agreement for the Army paying for me to go to school at the College of William and Mary. Running into poor leadership is something that I think most Army soldiers run into at any point in their career, either on the officer enlisted side, on the warrant officer side, whatever. It's going to happen. There are a few people who haven't run into leaders that make them change their whole way of thinking and make them question if they even want to go on. And running into this person and having to deal with this person, first it made me want to get out of the Army. But I thought better of it, and I realized maybe I just want to stay in the Army, but I want to do something different. So that's what I did. Against a lot of people's advice, I put in a request to voluntarily transfer out of the logistics branch to the Acquisition Corps. I was told by multiple people that I would have a difficult time getting promoted, and there were a lot of people who tried to sow fear in my mind and fear in my heart, but I realized, you know what? I'm going to just go for this because I think it's the right thing to do, and my intuition's telling me that I need to do something different. I had always wanted to be a battalion commander, but I realized that maybe I don't want to be a battalion commander, and maybe it's time to take care of myself. I've been taking care of people for all these years. I've been in the Army for 11 years, I think, at that point. I've been taking care of soldiers all this time. I've been putting my physical and mental health to the side. It's time to do something that I want to do. So I did it, and against all odds, because logistics wasn't letting anybody go out of the branch and acquisition wasn't accepting anybody in my year group, but against all odds, I wrote an exception memo and I got accepted by the Acquisition Corps, and I'm so grateful to this day that I changed the Acquisition Corps because my MBA has helped me out a lot, and I found out that I love numbers, I love business, and I love being part of the Acquisition Corps. I get to work in a subject that I love every day. The tactical level of the Army is rewarding. It's excellent, and it's an outstanding experience to be around soldiers. I was a company commander twice in the 101st Airborne Division. It doesn't get much realer than that to be a company commander in the 82nd Airborne Division, the 101st Airborne Division, 10th Mountain. Those units are the units they deploy the most, and they're physically and mentally tough. Switching to the Acquisition Corps, I didn't feel like I was betraying anything. I didn't feel like I was betraying anybody when I did it. I felt like I had done my time in the tactical level of the Army. I had put in the work. I had performed better than most of my peers. My paperwork said I did, at least. So I didn't feel any sort of remorse for switching to the acquisition core. I felt like it was time to do something different. It was time to take care of myself, and I'm so glad that I made that decision. I remember in the summer of 2017 when we were doing our capstone project at the College of William and Mary, there was an ORSA that was there. It was a lieutenant colonel, and he was trying to recruit us. There were 6 of us, I think, in the room, 6 of us students in the room. He was trying to recruit us to come to the ORSA side. And the one thing that I'll always remember that he said is, for the past 10, 15 years, I've been giving my body to this. I've broken down my body for the Army. But now that I'm an ORSA, I get to use my mind. And that will always stick with me, because now in the acquisition core, I'm still doing 12-mile road marches every week. I'm still putting in PT on my own, but I get to use my mind. I get to exercise my mind more so than my body, and I am able to be appreciated for my mind. And I'm not saying that that doesn't happen at the tactical level of the Army, because you have to have a sharp mind to be good at the tactical level of the Army as well. But the functional areas are more oriented toward thinking and solving super complex problems. That's what they're geared toward. Third decision, going to airborne school and graduating from airborne school in the beginning of 2017. I have been fighting to get to airborne school since I joined the Army. My one regret was when I was joining the Army at a Newport News, Virginia, my recruiter asked me if I wanted airborne school in my contract. And I assumed that anybody could get airborne school, that it didn't matter what unit you went to. So I told him, no, I'll just do it whenever I get to my unit. I was sorely, sorely mistaken. It depends on what kind of unit you're in. The Army's not going to pay for you to go to airborne school if you are at Fort Cavazos, formerly known as Fort Hood, or Fort Carson, unless you're in an airborne unit. The Army's not going to pay for you to go to any sort of school unless the unit that you're in can use your skill set. When I was at Fort Cavazos from 09 to 12, of course I didn't go to airborne school because I wasn't in an airborne unit. And then when I was at Fort Campbell from 13 to 16, that's not an airborne unit, it's an air assault unit. So I went to air assault school, but I didn't go to airborne school. I wanted to go to airborne school because I was always afraid of heights, and I wanted to prove to myself that I could jump out of an airplane. The way that I was able to go to airborne school was when I was an aide de camp to the commanding general of Army Contracting Command in Redstone Arsenal. He asked me what I wanted to do, and he's a great guy. I still talk to him every now and then today. And I told him I had always wanted to go to airborne school. So that's a good lesson, is to always ask, always say what you want, say what's on your mind, because you never know. He was a 2-star general, and he was in the position to make it happen. So he pulled some strings, and then I had to do a lot of work as well. I was able to get to Fort Moore. Back then it was called Fort Benning. I was able to get to Fort Moore, and I was able to go to airborne school, and the Army paid for it. Being able to jump out of the airplane, it was scary, but when you're lined up to jump out of the C-130, you're going and you're moving down the line so quickly, and if you stop, you'll hold up progress and you'll get yourself into trouble. So there's no choice but to jump. I didn't see anybody do what's called a jump refusal. I didn't see anyone do that, because everyone who's there, most of the people want to be there. They're like me. Most of the people want to be there. The people who don't want to be there are the ones who got assigned to airborne units who don't want to go. So I did see, I think it was a major, she ended up getting sent back to Fort Bragg because she couldn't jump out of the 40-foot tower because she was afraid. And I can understand that, because the 40-foot tower was more scary than jumping out of the C-130, because with the 40-foot tower, you can see the ground below you and you can see it clearly. In the C-130, you can't really see the ground. You're so high up there that you just fall out of the plane and your parachute opens automatically. But I was hungry to be there, so I relished every moment, and I truly lived in the present moment. I hadn't been to Fort Moore since I went to Officer Candidate School in 2009, so it was such a great experience to be back there. I went to an old restaurant that a lot of my fellow candidates and I would go to during OCS, because OCS was 8 weeks long. And being back in Georgia, being back at Fort Moore, it brought back a ton of memories, and I will always remember those 3 weeks at airborne school. It was a fantastic decision to go. I'm glad that I fought for it, and I'm glad that I graduated. I don't know if I'm going to do any more than 5 jumps. All I have is 5 jumps, but 5 is enough for me, and I'm glad that I got the experience. The fourth decision I'll talk about is the decision to go to air assault school. If I had to choose between air assault school and airborne school, I would do airborne school all day. At airborne school, all the instructors have to memorize pages and pages of instruction. They're just sitting up there in front of you, reciting everything. And none of them forgot any of the instructions. It was absolutely amazing. I've never seen anything like it, and it spoke to the dedication and professionalism of, they're called black hats, of the black hats. Still, air assault school, it was a good experience. It's more physically difficult than airborne school, especially day 0 with the obstacle course, and then the final day with the 12-mile road march that you have to do with a weapon, with your body vest, with your Kevlar, all that stuff in less than 3 hours. So it's not a walk. You're jogging for most of the way. And I remember I did mine in 2 hours and 47 minutes, which is not bad, not great, but not bad. But if you can do 12 miles with all that gear on in less than 3 hours, you're in pretty good physical shape. I think the best takeaway that I got from air assault school was the 12-mile road march. Rucking and road marching, whatever you want to call it, has become popular in the past 5 or 10 years. It is one of the best exercises that you can do. Walking is grossly underrated as an exercise. You put a backpack on and you put some boots on and you walk for 3 or 4 hours at a time. I did one today, actually. I have over 30,000 steps, and I'm going to burn around 3,500 calories today. It's one of the best exercises you can do. The last on the list of the best decisions that I made was refusing to comply with an unlawful order when I was a young officer. It's much harder to stand up for yourself and to not comply with an unlawful order that your commander is giving you when you're young than it is when you're older. Because when you're young, you don't have a lot of confidence. I had been in the Army for a year when this incident happened. If this were to happen today, it would be easy for me to say no, because over the past 15, 16 years, I've developed so much confidence in myself, coming from leading troops in combat, coming from repetitions, coming from understanding how the Army works, that for me it would be a matter of just saying no, that's against the regulations, against the law, I'm not doing it. But when you're younger and you're trying to prove yourself and you don't have a lot of confidence, it's difficult to look your commander in the eye and say, no sir, I'm not doing this. I was given an order to bring blank ammunition into a motor pool, and it's against the regulation on the base that I was in. When I relayed this to the folks who worked for me in my platoon, because I was a platoon leader at the time, the NCO who ran the ammo section respectfully and politely said, I can't do that. And I was proud of myself, because instead of trying to push him to do the wrong thing, because I would depend on him because he knew how to drive the truck and bring the ammo into the motor pool, instead of pushing him, I just said, you know what, you're right. We've got to do the right thing here. So I told my company commander that we couldn't bring the ammo into the motor pool, that we had another way of keeping it close to the motor pool, but we weren't going to bring it into the motor pool per the regulation on the base we were on. I remember it clearly to this day. Clear, crystal clear. His eyes got bloodshot red, and he took his fist. We had a whiteboard in the office that I use. He took his fist, put it through the whiteboard completely, punched through the whiteboard. It was amazing just watching somebody get that angry. I'd never seen anybody get that angry before. Put his fist through the whiteboard, said a whole bunch of expletives, a whole bunch of curse words, and then walked out. After that, my first sergeant came and we talked about it, and he told me, he said, you know what, this is ridiculous. He should know better than to act like that. I'm going to go talk to him. He went and talked to him. The commander, he never apologized to me, but we talked about it in passing months down the road, and he did everything and said everything but apologize. He said, no, we can't bring the ammo into the motor pool anymore, and we're going to follow the rules and all that stuff. I never needed an apology from him. I knew that he was under an extreme amount of pressure. That unit that we were in, it was super busy. We were preparing to go to Iraq. It was a tough unit. It was a really hard time. So I have a lot of empathy for him. I don't agree with what he did, but I understand why he did it. But I'm proud that I didn't relent to the pressure and that I stood by my people and that I did the right thing, because it set the tone for me for the rest of my career, and it gave me the confidence that I needed. I think the biggest confidence booster was when the first sergeant, who at that time he had been in the Army for 19 or 20 years at that point, I believe, when he went and talked to the commander, I knew that I was in the right, because if I was wrong, the first sergeant, he was that kind of guy. He was super honest, and he would call you out if you were wrong. He would have told me. He would have had no trouble telling me, you know what, you're wrong. You need to get the ammo into the motor pool. All right, so those are 5 of the best decisions that I made in the Army. If you're thinking about the Army as a career, I think it's a great choice. I've had a great time doing it. There have been a lot of hard times. I don't know what it's like to work in the civilian sector. The only civilian jobs I've ever had were when I was in high school and when I was in college. I came into the Army 3 or 4 months after I graduated from college. So I don't know what it's like to work on the civilian side. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Check out some of the other videos that I got on this channel. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, jump rope to freedom. Peace, take care.